So in this first one, he says this, you searched me and you've known me. You know when I sit down and when I rise up, and you discern my thoughts from afar. Let's work backwards. So from afar is not distance. He's not saying you're way up in heaven and I'm way down here and somehow you work in my life. In fact, the psalm is actually proving the opposite of that. It's refuting that kind of ideology. The word afar is referencing time. So David's not saying you're way far away from me, but you can still somehow see me, like God has some sort of telescope. What he's saying is, from far off in time, you did these things. You searched me, and you knew me. This is really important because for a lot of us, especially, we've been going through some, I would say, some challenging ideas that are calling for us to reform our lives. To really, to move away from personal rights and personal assertion and personal dominance, and instead to take up our crosses, where Paul is just laying it out for us so clearly, saying, if you do not build with God's wisdom, if you insist on this world's wisdom, which is self-preeminence, you will only destroy yourself and the people around you. And that's a hard word sometimes. And not only is it a hard word, it's an overwhelming word, because sometimes we can look in our hearts and we can think like, there's no way I can move forward with this. There's no way I could be a part of this. There's no way that God will continue to work in me. You ever felt that way? I'm too far gone. There's no way back. He's given up on me. I'm not worth it. All these things that we have, these are lies from Satan. And what we have here is a God-inspired song from David in the bad person category. Right? And he's saying, God, you've always known me. You've always searched me. Nothing surprises him. You know, it's interesting, us as human beings, have you ever held back something about yourself because you didn't want to be rejected? Like typically when we don't meet people, you don't say, hi, I have a lot of baggage in my life. Right? Usually we want to kind of like IV drip that, right? You don't just bolus the whole thing in there, a big giant, 60 centimeter, milliliter. No, you drip it in. You hang that bag and you get the drip going, and that's how the bad stuff comes in. We kind of ease people into it. Why? We don't want to be rejected. We don't want people to go, wow, you're too much for me. And it can be with like silly things. I talk a lot. I know I talk a lot. And so if I'm meeting with someone, I actually do. If you ever sit down and meet with me, I put my hand over my mouth. Do you know why? I sit there like this. I do that because I just want to talk. And so a lot of times I think like somebody will be saying something and I'll want to say something. Because I'll think like, oh, I already have the answer for that. It's the Bible. I don't actually do that. But you know what I'm saying? And so it's just that action of having to move my hand away from my mouth stops me from speaking. And so when I hang out with new people, I usually try to not talk a lot. Because I don't want to be like, wow, this guy really loves himself. I don't want to know the truth. So a lot of times we'll do things and we'll refrain and we'll hold back because we say, if they knew that, they wouldn't have anything to do with me. And here's the thing. There is times to interact with people and respond to them based on what they have done or are doing. Okay, we're not saying if someone runs in here and says, I'm going to kill everybody, we're not going to think to ourselves, well, I don't really want to judge him before the time. I mean, could you maybe tell me about what's happening in your life? No, we're going to jump on that dude and beat him to a pulp till the cops get here. Right? We're going to subdue him. We're going to do it until the threat is over. How's that, right? Okay, so we're not going to try to reflect and be like, well, maybe there's some things he's just going through. No, we're going to stop it. So there are times that you do interact with people based on what's happening. Does that make sense? But in general, aside from the extreme outliers, we're not to deal with people that way. We're to look at them with agape love. We're to care about them. We're to discuss these things. And more importantly, that's how Jesus deals with us. Now, he has an advantage in that we can't physically harm him, and there's not that urgency per se. That doesn't necessarily apply to him in that way. But he, and this is living proof, God interacts with us regardless of what we've done, regardless of how we've shoved him aside. This is really great. We've never surprised God. He's never in his life said, I never saw that coming. He's never said, I can't believe you said that. He's never said, I can't believe you did that. It's never happened. He's searched you and he's known you from afar off and he's accepted you in Christ. See, that's one of the things that makes the gospel so powerful. It isn't like a fake religion that says, well, this event happened, so now you can try really hard. And if you try hard enough, then you can get to heaven. Right? That's Islam. That's Buddhism. That's that. No, this is that Christ paid everything that we could ever owe, that we could ever think or say or do. And he took those things that we did and he nailed them to his cross. And when he said the new covenant is in my blood, he meant it. That the whole covenant, what? The covenant of how a person can be with God. The covenant that God made with human beings, where he said, if you trust my son and his sacrifice, you will forever be in my presence. That was the covenant. And Jesus said that covenant was fulfilled, ratified, if you will, in his blood. So there's no other part that enters in to that covenant save what Jesus did, that we receive by faith. He has searched us and he's known us.